What happens when the Pope dies? Today on History You Should Know, this is the story of the Conclave. On April 21st, 2025, the beloved leader of the Catholic Church, Pope Francis, died. He was a pope of firsts. The first pope from the Americas, the first from the Jesuit order, and the first to choose Francis as his papal name, among others. With his passing, the entire Catholic world entered a centuries-old series of rituals that culminates in the process of electing its next leader, called the Conclave. Pero alam mo ba na sa halos 2,000 taong kasaysayan ng simbahang Katoliko, choosing the Pope this way has only been around for less than half of the Church's lifetime. Pero bago natin pag-usapan ang Conclave, here's a quick rundown of what happens after a Pope dies. It starts with the confirmation of death. The Cardinal Camerlengo would call the Pope by his baptismal name 3 times. If there's no answer, he is officially pronounced dead. In Pope Francis's case, Cardinal Kevin Farrell called him Jorge thrice. Of course, nowadays, this tradition is also accompanied by medical confirmation. Tapos, isasara ang papal apartments. Using a red ribbon and wax, this is to ensure the sanctity of the space. Then comes the ring of the fisherman. Ang bawat Santo Papa ay merong unique na singsing kapag napili. When they die or leave office, the ring of the fisherman, a symbol of the Pope's authority, would be destroyed to avoid being wrongfully used or abused. If you've seen movies like Conclave or Angels and Demons, you'd know a little bit about this. This is followed by the period of lying in state for public viewing. In 3 days, tens of thousands of people lined up to pay respects to Pope Francis during his public viewing in St. Peter's Basilica. Finally, a funeral mass is held before the Pope is buried in his final resting place. On April 26, 2025, Pope Francis was buried in St. Mary Major. I am recording this episode on the very same day, which means that right now, the Catholic Church is in its official period of mourning. This is out of respect for the fallen Pope and to give the Vatican time to prepare for the next phase, the Conclave. This is one of Christianity's most important rituals. And ideally, here's how it should go. Sa May 7, magtitipon ang College of Cardinals sa loob ng Sistine Chapel para iboto ang susunod na Santo Papa. They would be sealed together in one room to cast their votes. Technically, any baptized Catholic male could become the Pope. But since 1378, only cardinals have risen to the position. To share the decision with the world, everyone looks at the chimney. After every round of voting, the ballots are burned along with a chemical to produce a certain color of smoke. Kapag wala pang napili, black smoke ang lalabas sa chimney. Kung meron naman, white smoke. To officially become Pope, one needs to get a 2/3 majority of the votes. The candidate will then be asked if he is willing to take on the role. If he says yes, he then gets to choose his papal name. Finally, the senior cardinal deacon appears on the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica to proclaim,
Habemus Papam!
We have a Pope. In the case of the last 2 popes, Francis and Benedict XVI, this election only took 2 days. The longest conclave in modern times was 5 days. Considering what's at stake, mabilis at efficient ang prosesong ito para sa pagpili ng pinakamahalagang posisyon sa simbahang Katoliko. But this elaborate process came from a fascinating story. When Christianity was starting out, St. Peter, the rock on which the church would be built, became the first pope. Although he was never really given that title because, well, it didn't exist. The word pope itself means father. The title pope came centuries later, and it eventually became the title for the Bishop of Rome. Noong umpisa, nag-a-appoint ng susunod na pope ang current pope. But when Rome started to slowly welcome Christianity, the role became increasingly political and influential. This led to popes being elected instead of appointed. Lay people, aka those who were non-clergy like me, didn't directly vote, but they could approve or disapprove of certain candidates. As you can imagine, this easily complicated matters. By the Middle Ages, the role of the Pope went from spiritual leader to head of its very own sovereign territory called the Papal States. That meant power and money, which meant becoming Pope in the Middle Ages sometimes required violence and political manipulation. Sometimes they were just appointed by powerful allies or by the influence of certain people. It's obviously quite far from what's about to happen in the conclave of 2025. So how did it all change? I'll save my favorite change for last. The first step came when Pope Nicholas II decided that it was time for a change in 1059. He decreed a papal bull called In Nomine Domini, or in the name of the Lord, stating that only cardinal bishops were eligible to elect the next pope. That's one. But the Catholic Church continued to run into problems. Selections were difficult because even though a majority vote counts as a win, 51% was only 2% away from 49%. This caused further complications. So in 1179 and later in 1621, the requirement of having 2/3 supermajority of the vote and the rule that no cardinal could elect themselves were established. That's two. But the final piece of the puzzle was only solved after the longest election process in the history of the Catholic Church. Earlier, I mentioned that the longest election process in modern history took 5 days. The longest in the Church's history took 3 years. 1268, Viterbo, Italy. After the death of Pope Clement IV, the cardinals had to select their next leader. But no one in Viterbo thought they would take as long as they did. Throughout its course, out of 20 eligible cardinals, 3 died without a consensus being reached. The authorities were losing patience, so they decided to lock them all up in a palazzo. But that wasn't enough, so they went a step further and rationed their food. The longer they took, the less food would be provided. But that still didn't force them to make a decision. So as a last resort, they decided to remove the roof of the palazzo, exposing the cardinals to wind, rain, heat, and all the other elements. And that did the trick. After 3 long years, they elected Pope Gregory X in 1271. The Pope they elected knew this dangerous indecision could happen again. So in 1274, he decided to decree another papal bull, Ubi Periculum, or where danger lies. It states that in future elections, the cardinals would be isolated from the outside world, gathered together in one place, and their food would be regulated. The hope was that in their seclusion, their spirits would be open to divine guidance to choose the church's next supreme leader. Since they were all in a locked room, the only way they would be released after the vote was with a key. And that's where the process of electing the new pope earned its name. The Latin conclave means with key, referring to a room that could be locked with a key or under lock and key. Today, 751 years later, we call it the conclave. Sure, it's a more efficient way of selecting the next pope, but that doesn't mean it's immune from politics and even power struggles. Just a few decades after its creation, there was a 39-year period when the Catholic Church had not 1, not 2, not 4, but 3 popes. But that's a story for another time. As the world looks to the College of Cardinals to elect the next leader of 1.4 billion Catholics across the planet, it helps to know that at least we won't have to wait 3 years. And that is the story of the conclave. Follow for more, and boom! Now you know.